Hello everyone, it's Dr. A, and today's lecture is on painting. This is the first part of this lecture. So let's talk about painting. It grows out of drawing. It's really intertwined with drawing. I shouldn't say grows out. That's kind of an incorrect way to put that. But it tends to be more formalized, and it also tends to take a lot of time. There's also a ton of decisions you have to make. I mean, all the media have that, but the things you have to worry about are going to be things like what kind of support you have, what kind of ground you have, what's your pigment going to be mixed with. So you have a little bit more of technical things to worry about. But let's talk about what we're gonna discuss here today. Let's get into it. Paint has three components. It's the pigment, the binder, and the vehicle. The pigment is where the color comes from, and all paints have pigment. The earliest pigments came from nature, but today many pigments are synthetic and therefore they're cheaper. And so paint has become much cheaper since, say, someone like Michelangelo would have had it painting in the Renaissance. They also have to worry about the binder. This mixes with the pigment to hold the pigment particles together. Think about a tube of toothpaste. I mean, we're going to have to bring some visuals in here. What that kind of looks like when you squeeze it out is the pigment binder combination. You buy those two together, and then the third component you need will be the vehicle. The vehicle is what spreads the paint. It makes it thinner, so it makes it spreadable. And for instance, every paint has a different combination here, but we'll talk about oil paint. Most people think about oil paint. The vehicle is turpentine and the binder is linseed oil. So all of this is going to matter as you, the artist, chooses the type of media that you want to work with. You're going to choose your paint to enhance your subject. All right? You're also going to worry about what you're going to put it on. And what you're going to put it on, what you apply it to, is called the support. In some supports, you have a more porous surface. Excuse me. Such as canvas. And so in canvas, you have to prepare it, you have to seal it, and you thus create what's called a ground. So you have these terms to deal with today: pigment, binder, vehicle, support, and ground. Think about that stuff. All right? The priming of the support is important, especially when you get to oil. All right? It's unnecessary in some things like paper because it provides both the support and the ground. Okay, so let's start there. So let's talk about one of the types of paint you get to choose from as an artist. And here's, I forgot I put these in here for you, but here kind of gives you an idea of what the pigment looks like. All right, and there's, so you can write it down. Pigment, binder, vehicle. But let's talk about one of the types of paint you might be familiar with, and that's watercolor. Watercolor may be something you're familiar with because watercolor was what they gave you when you were a kid. Remember some of you, those annoying little dots that came, like little, dots of color that came with your coloring book usually, and you got this cheap little brush and you dipped it in water and you rubbed it in those dots and you painted in the coloring book, and it was so disappointing because it was so transparent. Well, that was watercolor. And people let you use that because this medium is very, very non-toxic. The binder that they use here is a gum arabic, it's called, and you can eat it. You can actually eat it and not worry about it. And if you know anything about kids, those of you who had them or babysat them or have little brothers, You know, that's the most important thing with little kids, is they will put anything in their mouths. As I've always told people, I used to work at a daycare when I was, God, my first year in college. And I remember I was doing the art program, and one of the things I learned was little kids are like little goats. They will eat anything. And so you have to be really careful what kind of material you give them. So this is one of those things that you consider in watercolor works. So you have a binder of gum arabic, and then you have a vehicle of water. Now, all things you choose are going to have pluses and minuses to them. And one of the minuses of watercolor is it dries very quickly, and also it's somewhat transparent. You can see here in this image from Winslow Homer the transparency of the paint right here. I mean, you can actually see the paper through here. But it works in this image because Winslow Homer did a lot of scenes that had water, involved water in them. So it does indeed enhance his subject. The good things about watercolor, besides the fact that it's non-toxic, you can put it on almost any type of support, paper, anything. It's not, you know, it's not a problem. And also, like I said, I think I'm repeating myself now, but sorry, but that's one of the best things. Can put it on any type of support, non-toxic. Drawbacks, dry so fast, and transparent. All right, one of the oldest forms of paint is tempera. And tempera in its earliest form was called egg tempera, and that's because the binder was traditionally, and that's the name, egg yolk. As you can see here in this image that I have up for you, that egg yolk is there, and the reason why it works so well is because it's an incredibly durable protein. Egg yolk is. It'll last for thousands of years. Ask the people who use tempera paint and painting the interior of Egyptian tombs. It works. Okay, so you don't have any problems with that. What doesn't work about egg tempera is it's extremely brittle when it dries. It's water thinned, but that egg yolk just gets very brittle. It's a beautiful substance. I mean, if you look at paintings, it's very popular in the Middle Ages. They're just beautiful, and they retain their color. The color is true to when it was first done, but the support has to be very rigid. So in other words, you cannot use a piece of paper or even a canvas. You would have to use something like a piece of wood, something that's non-flexible. And that's because you don't want it to crack. All right? It was much favored in the Middle Ages until the perfection of oil paint by the Van Eycks. But by the time we get into the 20th century, tempera paint was made into a synthetic paint, and now we have something that everyone can use. The beauty of, excuse me again, allergies, I can't help it. The beauty of tempera paints is they're opaque. O-P-A-Q-U-E, opaque. That is the opposite of transparent. And so you can't see through them to the paper. They're very fast drying though as well, just like watercolor. And so for many people this can be a drawback. It would be oil paint that would become the most successful paint for Western painters. This is the favorite paint of Western painters, and that's because of one particular quality it has. It dries very slowly. Okay, before this, it was tempera, 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 and then we have oil. Hubert and Jan van Eyck perfected oil by using and introducing the linseed oil into it, and that just made the paint just, you know, perfect for what artists wanted. So we have a binder of linseed oil. That's linseed, L-I-N-S-E-E-D, and then you have a vehicle of turpentine. All right, it's a beautiful finish. It's very shiny and it's very flexible. But the fact that it dries so slowly is really, really what people loved about it. You could take, like, for instance, this particular painter loved the fact that it dries so slowly. All right, and he would take Girl with the Pearl Earring, Vermeer, by the way, his name is, sorry. He would take years to complete a painting. As long as you maintain the painting, its integrity by keeping it in its environment with something covering it, not touching it, but covering it that was somewhat damp, it could stay wet. And it was very flexible and you could push it around. Its drawback is it darkens with age, and unlike watercolor, you have to really be careful about the support as far as priming it or sizing it. You definitely have to prepare the support to create a ground that won't let the paint absorb in. So to create the ground, it has to have lessen the absorbency. All right. Now, most people choose to paint in oil because they want to take the time to work the painting, but there are people who do use it all in one sitting, and when you do that, it's called the direct method. Okay, so I'm going to end part 1 of the painting lecture here, and there will be a part 2 beginning with acrylic.